which I then retrieved Friday.
Mine?
I will be giving you today something that we're going to actually be doing tomorrow, and that is 2 more pieces of paper, which in the short term are all about thinking about the Vietnam War, but you could use this as evidence in a Blue Book essay, and or if you're writing about America and the world, there's some good stuff in there. It'll make sense in a few minutes. Any questions on Szechuan?
Oh,
I mean, it's already May 6th. Our next assessment is May
That's sweet.
21st, I think. I mean, it's already almost here. Holy cow. Yes. 23rd. Yep. I made it due on the 23rd because of him and the other girl. You're welcome. Okay. Right. Any questions? Let's finish up our discussion of the Vietnam War. My computer froze. No, I did not sign
You
up.
guys seen Spencer today?
Yeah.
You haven't signed out.
Why would I have to sign up?
I didn't even mark your hand. Okay, Stevie. Beauty. I took your pen again. Here you go. What? Thank you, Maddie. You're welcome. I sounded like Grant when I said that. Thank you, Maddie.
When last we chatted about Vietnam, why? Why? The North had invaded. The Americans had put soldiers directly in, creating 4 different military groups within South Vietnam. Can anyone rattle off all 4? 4 military entities all fighting in South Vietnam. Go ahead, Dominic.
You got
Murka, SVA, NVA, Vietcong. Okay, very good. Right, and then if we wanted to team them up, the SVA and Murka versus NVA and Vietcong. You are looking at a map which shows the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The North Vietnamese snuck into South Vietnam by going through Cambodia and Laos, and the Americans responded when they found out by bombing Cambodia and Laos, bombing the trails, which led to conflict in those 2 countries. Yes, dear.
Did China help out the NBA?
Yes, they did. Not necessarily directly with Chinese soldiers necessarily, although there might have been some, but mostly military equipment. Because of the stuff that we went over Friday, remember all those nasty things that happened, Americans getting shot on college campuses, the Pentagon Papers secretly reporting about America spreading the war to Laos, the execution of Vietnamese citizens by American soldiers. What else was there? Burning of draft cards, huge protests. The United States decided we got to get out. We got to get out. But how to get out? How to get out of Vietnam? And the idea that they came up with was this thing called Vietnamization. Vietnamization. I'm just wondering if anyone knows what it is. Go ahead.
You train troops, and then you train the Vietnamese, then you take some of yours up, right?
Very good. All right. So just a gradual withdrawal. We're not going to just suddenly disappear one day. We will train and arm the South Vietnamese. When 10,000 South Vietnamese are ready, we will withdraw 10,000 American soldiers. 10,000 more South Vietnamese, 10,000 more American soldiers. It took years to withdraw American soldiers. We were out, by and large, by about 1970. We'll go with 3.
Why did you start that statement if you didn't know the
That's how I get through the day. I think 73.
So what's
Ish.
What?
Actually, it says right here,
Gradual withdrawal from the
1973
Vietnam
ceasefire.
War. They trained
So,
and Vietnamese
all
to take life of
Americans-
Americans.
I shouldn't say all. Almost all American soldiers were out by 1973. The one American presence that remained was at the American Embassy in South Vietnam. Remember, in our eyes, South Vietnam was a nation. And so we had a diplomatic presence in Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, at the American Embassy. Okay? Other than that, there were no Americans officially. There probably was some CIA efforts, secret CIA efforts. But we were basically out by 73. That meant South Vietnam was on its own. It lasted 2 years. 2 years. By 1975, there was no more South Vietnam. The North conquered the South, synthesis, just like the Union conquered the Confederacy. That's when the Americans abandoned the embassy as well, and I've got some pictures. It's kind of amazing. We've already talked about the War Powers Act, so we don't need to talk about that. Pol Pot. That's a person. His name was Pol Pot. Has anyone ever heard of him? Dominic, you've heard of him. Okay, very good. Note that, everyone. Dominic has heard of him. He is the leader of Cambodia. Or I should say, he became the leader of Cambodia. When the Americans started bombing Cambodia, Pol Pot overthrew the government of Cambodia, arguing that the Cambodian government couldn't even protect Cambodia from the warmongering Americans, and established a communist government. Just to give you an idea how nuts this guy was, he established a government in Cambodia that was so radical that 4 years later, 1979, Vietnam invaded Cambodia and overthrew him. Think about that. That's crazo. When a fellow communist country invades you to overthrow you, you're nuts. And we'll talk about that some more. I'm going to pause there. I'm now going to give, I need you to remember your number. You're either a 1 or a 2 or a 3. You are a 1 or a 2 or a 3. And you are a 1. And you're a 2 and you're a 3. And you're a 1 and you're a 2 and you're a 3. And you're a 1 and you're a 2 and you're a 3. And a 1 and a 2 and a 3. And a 1 and a 2 and a 3. And a 1 and a 2 and a 3. And a 1 and a 2 and a 3. And a 1 and a 2 and a 3. And a 1 and a 2 and a 3. And a 1. Okay. Ones, raise your hand. Rest assured, you will all have access to all of this information soon, but not yet. Do not show the other people at your table what I am giving you. You are this person. That is you. That is you.
Maddie.
I'm not looking.
That is you. Choose, raise your hand. This is you. Do not show this piece of paper to anyone.
See. Don't look.
Sorry, Sarah.
Okay, if you're 3s, relax. Okay, 1s, you will, when I say so, get up and accumulate over, let's put you at these 2 tables. So you'll switch these 2 tables together and you'll sit together. 2s, you will sit at, you'll kick that boy out and you will gather at those 2 tables, squishing them together. Aw, you're my favorite. And 3s, ye shall gather at these 2 tables. 1s, 2s, 3s. Go!
Yeah.
3s, right.
Ben, let's go.
Can I be in the video? Hi.
Congrats.
Basically famous.
What do you mean, basically?
Yeah.
I am.
Ben!
Oh gosh, can I leave this group, Father?
Hi, everybody.
Permission to
I haven't
leave
got
this
yelled
group.
at today. That's
So
good.
sorry. Look at my paper.
Okay,
It's yours.
so
yeah.
I will give instructions to these two groups. Basically, you are the United States. You are a United States government official. Okay. So here's how this will work. That group represents a French/Vietnamese business person who wants the U.S., this is the U.S., to help them. They want American help to help the South Vietnamese establish an independent capitalist country. Okay? Their perspective is the Vietnam War is part of the Cold War. Hooray, capitalism, boo his communism. That group is a member of something called the Viet Minh. You have permission to cross out the word Minh and put their other name. Cong, the Viet Cong. Same group. That group wants the Americans to help you because you are trying to do what the Americans did, establish an independent country against a hated European foe. Your perspective is that this is a civil war. War on Cold War, communism, war for independence, and that the South illegally seceded. Does that sound familiar? The South illegally seceded. That's your perspective. Okay? So what's going to happen here is I'm going to give you about 5 minutes
5 minutes.
to read over your info sheet. And then in class tomorrow, we will do this little exercise. But one of you will be debating against one of you in front of one of you.
Well, no.
Dibs,
Who
Dawson,
should
Riley.
the U.S. help?
Dibs.
Okay?
I get Dawson Riley. We work.
Read it, and then I will happily answer any
So are the
questions. You're a
judges.
2, so you're over there.
We're kind of like the judges.
Okay, so
Oh, sick. We're the
your
judge
job
again.
is in 5 minutes. Draft. Who do you want?
Who do you call Ben?
Who do you
I call
want?
Dawson Riley.
My one requirement, though, is make it reasonably fair.
Why'd you put Jack and Liv on the same team?
It happened to be that way. It just happened to be that way.
1, 3, 2, 4.
So if one of you wants to have like a piece of paper, and column 1 would be
I got it,
who from
guys.
that group, column 2 would be who from that
Okay,
group.
write down all of
before-
our names. Logan,
Okay, wait.
So there's possible there might be a group of
Logan.
2 because there might be. I
Hannah.
think there's more of them than.
Ben.
Wait, I better
Oh
double
my
space
God.
this. Okay.
Logan, Hannah,
You're Viet Cong.
Ben.
Oh, that was a weird age.
It doesn't matter. You can read your own handwriting. Chris- Oh, is she? Yeah, you're gonna be with her, Kristen. Chandra, Tyler, Whoa, that rhymes. And Riley. Okay.
Okay.
I'll take Dawson Riley.
Okay, I will write that down.
You can write it
Who do
underneath
you
my
have?
name.
Hannah.
And I definitely just spelled Riley's name wrong.
R-Y.
Okay, I want Stevie and Maddie. What do you want, Tyler?
Jack.
Olive Bryce.
And
You
who
want
do you
Jack
think
and
a
who?
fair opponent for Jack would be?
Olive Bryce and Liv.
Thank you. I hate to do this to you, Jack.
Who do you want, Tyler?
Somebody over there, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Somebody over there, raise your hand. Okay, you and Jack switch.
Bryson's already with us. Brandon.
Trade papers with each other.
Nope.
Now we know who Jack's opponent shall be. Yes,
Jack and who?
that one.
Oh.
Who's that one?
Liv.
Figure it out.
Liv?
Jack.
Then I'll have Bray.
Nope, Brendan and Madison are together.
Yeah, Jack.
Dang it. Then I'll
Yes,
have
Jack, you
Allison.
need to be the oppressor.
Go oppress, just like you oppress
Okay.
Potter every day.
That's right.
Chandra, who do you want?
Correct.
I'll take Michaela.
This is good for you, Jack.
Jody, I guess. Okay. Kyler. How about
Emma,
Emma and
Allison.
Michaela, or Kayla.
Have a common approach from what you're going to say because you're not going to do each other. Right? You're going to need
K-A-I-T-I.
how are
Okay,
you going to
Kristen
convince that person?
can have Grace.
Did Mask get chosen? Nothing. She's not on here.
Grace.
Make a list of the people who have not been chosen.
Soren.
Grace and Brody.
what you're doing.
So who hasn't been chosen?
Grace and Brody.
Do we have enough judges?
There's 10 and 10. How many judges?
Mm-mm.
We have like 9.
8. So we have 4 left over.
How do we have 8 judges, but
8, 10, and 10, 28. And there's like 34 in the class or whatever.
that should be
32.
So people who
Potter,
still.
you're flawed.
Okay, so we still have.
There might be team 2 against a team 1. So.
Okay, so
is there gonna be like there's gonna be 2 people and 2.
I'm gonna put what's his
There's 10
face?
there.
Dom with Ben.
No.
And yeah.
Somebody got up and left.
Yes.
There's somebody missing.
me.
Right?
I need my
No,
group.
Dom is a good.
No.
Dom is a good person. Ben, you're fine.
But he's not saying.
So there's 8 of you here.
Have you ever
So
heard
there-
them talk?
there might
They're
be-
like way down here. Don's up here.
Okay, I'll
We
put.
need
Put
good
him
match.
with,
Put
put
Don
him with Jack.
That's an
Oh yeah, and
So those 2 are teams of
Second
10.
one.
But for some reason, there's a team of 8
So
here.
take this.
I will.
That's what I said too. Has Madison
Nobody-
been chosen yet?
Yep.
Has Grace Kelsey been chosen yet?
Yep.
Has who's the one with the
Michaela.
TV?
Yep.
Michaela.
Zach.
Zach.
Put Zach with you.
No.
With Ben and Riley. Or Jackson and Riley.
gonna be a whole night stressing.
And Zach.
And
Okay.
who hasn't been chosen?
That's
overall?
not how you spell
Mason.
Brody.
It's
How do you
Y.
spell Brody?
It's just Y.
It's a Y, not an I. Not that it matters.
Bryn's
Sorry.
been chosen.
Who?
Bryn.
Yep.
Maddie.
Yep.
Viv.
Yep. Soren. You should put Soren with.
Yeah, Soren's just
Emma and Katie.
You can put it with them, right? Yeah, probably.
How do you spell Soren?
SLRES.
Jody. Yep. Mason. Can I put Mason with you?
Yeah, that's good.
That's actually a good fit, but I hate it.
Mason, you're on Riley's.
No, Mason should be a judge, and he should just take it. Did you just get here?
That means you're a criminal.
Yeah, you did. Come over here.
already comfortable over there.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's good. He's fine. He's fine.
Potter, can we take Mason as a judge to help? You know.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's a
Mason,
good idea.
you're a judge. We need another judge.
So Mason will take
Just have
Zach.
to take Zach and Dom,
Zach and Dom.
Yeah.
Zach and Soren.
or Zach and
Zach, Soren, and Dom.
Zach Soren.
Oh, I put this paper.
Liv, you're no longer going.
Yeah. You go back there. Kayla Huerta will be a judge.
Oh,
Okay.
Kayla. So Kayla takes Mason and Zach.
No.
Yeah, Mason and Zach are.
Logan, why you keep going over there?
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Stop it.
You need to not be a social
That's the
butterfly.
jury talking to one of the.
They're
That's
Okay.
conflict of
Potter,
interest.
They're
Get him out of
bribing
here.
me. It's okay.
Well, stop going
Objection,
over there.
speculation,
Oh my god.
court of law. I don't know what another.
Okay,
objection
guys.
is. I
Screwed
just
up. I got yelled at by Potter like
I just know
usual. Good.
the one objection is speculation. I don't know a lot of other objections.
Okay, I'm so confused now.
Okay, so
I'm
Kayla.
making a new list.
That's a good idea.
Okay, I'll read it off to you. But the for sure's are Kayla has Zach, Soren, Dom.
No, don't. Not. No, because then we have extra.
Zach and Soren. No, Zach and Dom. Sorry.
That's good. That's good.
What? Logan has Bryson and Allison. Sounds funny.
The hell?
Okay, Hannah has Stevie and Maddie. And Dom.
Remember, Jack is the only one with a brain at this.
Wow. Wow.
Ben has Dawson and Riley.
Ben, say hi.
Kristen, Grace, and Brody.
Ben, say hi. Tyler, say hi.
Hi. Chandra has Michaela and Jody.
We're all saying hi, Tyler.
Whoever's missing it will have a wonderful time watching that.
Yes.
We're gonna have a
You guys want to hear some jokes?
Tyler.
Eve.
Tyler is Jack.
How about that
and Lynn.
airplane food? Good one.
Okay, wait. Is Eve gonna be here tomorrow?
She's in
Good.
Madtown today.
Tyler is
If it
Jack
doesn't
and
work,
Lynn.
we can always
Tyler has
rethink
Emma and Kate. And Riley
In 2 minutes, I'm going to interrupt you,
Madison.
say some things, and then, assuming I finish before the hour's over,
missing
you
a
can
spot
just
for
keep
Soren.
going with what you're going.
We're
I just
missing a
got to
spot
make sure
for
I cover
Mason.
some
So
stuff.
if Eve gets here tomorrow.
So
those
keep
two
going
can
until
get
it's
shots.
11.
How many more slides do you have?
Okay. Potter, if Eve
Is
gets
Eve
here
gonna be here
tomorrow.
tomorrow? Does anyone know is Eve gonna be here tomorrow?
We can create
Bryn?
a
She is?
two-judge with one
Okay.
date sort of thing.
Eve's gonna be here
No,
tomorrow.
no, no. We have two little judges. So if she's here tomorrow, she can take
She
up the two
is.
extra. Oh, then we're good.
So
So Eve has Dom or Soren,
Oh,
Soren and
Spencer.
where's the
Put
other guy?
Spencer with Ben's
Mason.
group.
okay, so
Soren and Mason. And Dom and Spencer. I mean.
This?
there we go.
Hold it out.
Perfect.
And I just balled it up.
Hey,
Who
look,
wants to
let's
meet
see the
us?
class roster. Oh, those are grades and stuff. Where's the attendance sheets?
It's already, it's right there.
We have okay. There we go. Okay, so we got a spot for Dom, got a spot for Beeflane, Belil, Jody, Bateman, Michaela, Bryson, Mason, Soren, Hannah, Riley, Logan, Eve,
Michaela and Jody.
Stevie,
Michaela
Tyler,
and Jody.
Brody,
Jack and
Emma,
Liv.
Liv, Kayla, Kyla,
Brennan Madison.
Grace, yep, Brennan, Zach, Aaron, Dawson, me, Jack, Spencer, Allison, Jet.
Damn it, Jen.
Jet,
You can give me Jet.
Kristen. So how many extras do we have? We have two groups of three, and that's it. Okay,
So
we can't-
Spencer and Jet can go.
No, because there's
Oh, there's no more judges. Potter can be a judge.
It's
Oh, you
fine.
wanna
They're
judge
not even
Spencer
here.
Jet
They'll be
too?
fine. They're not here. They won't know what they're
We don't even know if Jet will be
This is gonna
back.
be a little add-on. Yeah.
He's in Green Bay.
Okay. Do you need this list?
Eventually.
Oh no, the film's on me still. Dang it.
Scored.
You want to
be
hang on to
saying
that?
any bad stuff about film, like you're doing soccer. That's not right, huh?
Can you like pause that and then like start it again?
1, 2.
That's okay. Everyone likes
3,
watching Logan.
4, 5, 6, 7 finger removal block.
So we just like stopping in the middle of notes.
Christ.
Detente, album treaty, salt, recognizing.
Okay, let me talk for 10 minutes-ish, and then you can keep going with what you're doing. One thing about that handout that I gave you, can you see how it would be useful to you about trying to argue what the Vietnam War was all about, which is one of the two topic choices for your Blue Book entry, right? Was it a civil war about creating this thing called Vietnam, or was it part of the Cold War and was a war that the U.S. should have supported? That's basically the two things. All right, let's take a look at what else is up here, and then a couple more slides. The U.S. Had as a leader at this time Richard Nixon. I'm sure you all have heard of Richard Nixon, and there's something about Watergate, but that's in a bit. That is Leonid Brezhnev. He's the leader of the Soviet Union. And Nixon and Brezhnev signed, this would be treaty number 2. Is that correct?
Is everyone moving?
This is a different pencil.
This is the second treaty of its kind, a treaty that reduced the number of nuclear missiles that existed. It's called the ABM Treaty. Anti-ballistic missile treaty. Anti-ballistic missile treaty. Okay? And it reduced the number of nukes that both countries had. So it was so successful that they kept going, and they started creating another treaty called SALT. T is treaty.
Super against long-range missiles.
Exactly. Or Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty. Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty. things were going really, really well. Relatively speaking, the United States and the Soviet Union signed a couple treaties and they met. These were big deals when the leader of the, I mean, imagine FDR meeting Hitler. Okay, that's what's going on here on that. Imagine George Bush meeting Osama bin Laden and, you know, shaking hands and sitting at a table and having a meal and then negotiating. That's the level here. Okay.
The ABM, what does that stand for again?
Anti-ballistic missile.
Okay. And these are both just the Soviet.
They're both treaties.
Yeah, treaties of the Soviet Union between the U.S.
You got it.
Like peace.
Here's another amazing photograph, and this is Nixon, and that is Mao Zedong. Remember my dog who mowed? That's the guy. That's the guy that he mowed for, Mao Zedong. And this is an amazing picture because I thought the U.S. pretended China wasn't China. And yet, clearly, that's Nixon meeting the leader of not China. What can anyone explain what's going on here? Why is this significant? There it is. Jack said it. This is the United States formally recognizing China as China. No more Taiwan pretending it's China. Again, this seems to be another act of good faith. We're signing treaties with the Soviets. I forgot to explain what détente was. We're recognizing China as China. Détente is a French term. It means thaw. Thaw. T-H-A-W. Get it?
No.
Cold War?
No.
Thaw?
No.
Let's warm the relationship between our two countries. They set up a phone so they could directly contact each other. That phone, by the way, still exists. If you see President Trump, if you look around behind him, there's a guy with a briefcase. That is a phone. He can open it up, pick it up, and Putin is immediately on the line. And same the other way around. Okay. Well, yeah. Okay, we'll move on.
What's detente?
Détente means thaw, an attempted improvement in the relationship between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. The examples of détente were these treaties. That's an improvement. Accepting communist China as the legitimate government of China. No more Taiwan. As a matter of fact, it goes beyond that. Not only did we accept China as China, but we acknowledged that Taiwan belonged to China. Okay, to be continued. All right.
So, like, fix the relationship, improve the
There.
relationship between U.S. and U.S.
This is a violent shift in gears. That chapter has violently ended. This is basically America in the world. America's a better place. World's a better place, you could argue. And now we're talking about liberal or conservative. Bam. So how many of you are writing that as your fourth paper, the liberal or conservative? I would argue that this slide is very useful to you. I am going to introduce to you 4 major Supreme Court decisions that were made during Nixon's presidency that I highly suspect you are all aware of. Which amendment is it that guarantees your right to privacy? Which amendment? What? Yeah, it's not an amendment. You do have a right to, as I like to call it, privacy.
Privacy.
Extra credit, but it's got to be documented. Tonight, dinner. Turn your phone on and record this. I will give you extra credit. Say this: Mother, Father, may be excused. I wish to have some privacy. And then they grant you privacy. You record that, bring it tomorrow, extra credit.
What if they say no?
That's still extra credit.
What's the extra credit?
The extra credit is the asking for privacy. Privacy. If you say privacy, no extra credit. Privacy. 1.
One free, no essay?
Correct. What? No. I changed my mind.
How about we get 1 point up from our essay?
The thing that I think you've heard from me several times, and I will reiterate this. Just because the Constitution doesn't say it, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You do have a constitutional right to privacy, and that is because the Supreme Court created it. In this decision, Griswold v. Connecticut, the Supreme Court created a new right. the right to privacy. This Supreme Court decision, as all Supreme Court decisions, are as valid as constitutional amendments. When the Supreme Court makes a decision, that becomes constitutional law. Now, of course, a later Supreme Court can overturn it. So it's not quite the same as an amendment, but it's in the ballpark. So you now have the right to privacy. How does that impact your lives? Well, what if you're a girl that gets knocked up and you want to terminate your pregnancy? You could argue, government, stay out of my life. I can do with my body what I want because I now have the constitutional right to privacy and I can terminate this pregnancy. You are looking at the Supreme Court decision upon which the Supreme Court based a later decision legalizing abortion. The Supreme Court said abortion needs to be legal because a woman's body is her private property, and the government cannot tell you what to do with your private property. You are free to disagree with that. This is America. Think what you want. I'm not sure. They're not exactly building a highway through a woman's body, so no. Okay. How many of you are aware of your Miranda rights? When you're arrested, no one had that wonderful experience. Neither have I. When you're arrested, what do they say? Keep going.
Anything you say,
Keep going. You have the right to an attorney, even if you can't afford one. Where'd that come from? That came from this Supreme Court case. Gideon was a man arrested, never had a lawyer, couldn't afford it. And so he was shockingly to no one found guilty. And in prison, he, with a little pencil, wrote to the Supreme Court, "Dear Supreme Court." And they got the letter and they read it and they thought, you know what, this isn't right. He never had an attorney. And so he was found guilty. But they said, but that's not fair. You have the right, you should have the right to equal representation, even if you can't afford it. I mean, think about it. Name another country where this happens, where if you can't afford a lawyer, the people trying to nail you will pay for your lawyer. Here. Because they want it to be fair. Where'd that come from? This Supreme Court case. Again, that's not in the Constitution, but a case established that right. It's a new right. Let's keep going. The Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. I mean, when the cops arrest you, what they say is, by the way, you shouldn't answer any questions. Now, where were you? Right? But they're telling you, if you answer any of these, we will use it to nail you. And they tell you, don't answer these questions. And then they ask you the questions. You put these two together, you don't have to answer any questions, and you get a lawyer because of the presumption of innocence in our country. It's a right that you have. A couple others that are directly affecting you in this building. But before we do, I want us all to stand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a crucifix on the screen, and I'm going to lead you in the Our Father. I'm going to say the Our Father. All right, everyone?
That's
We're going to... What? Yeah, I can't do that. Okay, I can talk to you about religion. I cannot preach to you about religion. I cannot introduce the Muslim faith and then laugh with you. Look what they believe, and then show you. Now here's the real one, and show you the Jewish religion. I can't do that.
That's what church is about this weekend.
Where did you get that right? Well, you might argue it's First Amendment right, but specifically, what happened was that there were schools where the teacher was doing exactly what I just said, leading the class in prayer. It gets a little gray because apparently that still sort of happens, not so much in classrooms, but coaches who lead their team in prayer. Now, I happened to coach volleyball this past fall, and a couple times, actually every time, the team would get together and they'd pray, and they'd ask me to join them. No, that's not illegal. They can ask me to join them. What would have been illegal is if I had started praying and then told them to join me. And then notice who didn't join me. Like, suddenly I don't like your serve or whatever, right? I can't do that. But that you'll hear every once in a while about something like that. Now, this says Bible in public school. You can have Bibles in public school. They just can't be taught as valid as biology or a history class. We can... In sociology, we'll take chunks of the Bible and look at it as an interesting historical document, but not as truth. By the way, I'm not saying the Bible isn't true or is true. I'm not touching that. That's for you to believe or not believe. That's totally up to you. Two cases that basically established no more prayer, no more teacher-led prayer in public school, and no more using the Bible as a source of truth. You can use the Bible as an interesting historical document, but not as equal in weight to biology, where life came from, that sort of thing. Okay.
But can teachers teach evolution?
Not only can they have to.
Or like no,
Why
but
is that?
like how it's like
Science.
how like the earth is made, like how everything was made. Are science teachers allowed to teach that?
Teach what? How the earth was made?
Like the Big Bang Theory or like that kind of
Yes,
stuff.
yes, because that is science. So, let me address that. So you might believe that God created the earth in 6 days, and then on the seventh day watched a little football, and then there's a competing version that says no, there was billions of years ago a large explosion, and that all mass was concentrated in this thing called the singularity, right? You're mostly empty space. Theoretically, you should be able to run through that wall and all your atoms will miss all the atoms of the wall. That would be amazing and highly unlikely, but theoretically it's possible. Anyway, all of that existed at one point as a singularity, and it exploded, right? And what I'm talking to you now is called science. Well, Wisconsin schools teach this thing called science. So they teach that theory. It's science. Recognize that I am not saying, by the way, it's fact. I'm not saying that, but it is science, and Wisconsin teaches science. You might believe in the 6-day religious theory. Great. Go to your priest, go to your Catholic school teacher, learn it through there, but you don't learn it in science because science teaches science. Okay. Last note here. This is a liberal series of court decisions, right? Government's going to protect your right to privacy. That's an expansion of government. Government is going to pay for your lawyer. That's an expansion of government. Government is going to make sure that you have more rights. It's an expansion of government. It's liberal. Of the 9 justices under Nixon's presidency, 4 retired. He got to name 4 new justices. So far, does anyone happen to know how many has Trump got to name so far? 2. He's gotten so far 2. Some people believe that's the most powerful thing a president has in his repertoire, the power to name Supreme Court justices, because they're there for life. And what do? They dictate constitutional policy. And so it says here that decisions like this would be unlikely after Nixon got to name more conservative justices. So we'll see how these decisions compare to some future Supreme Court decisions and how the court kind of shifted to a bit more conservative. Any questions there? Ready? Nixon was conservative, but he wasn't a nutcase hardcore conservative or a nutcase hardcore tree-hugging, owl-loving liberal. He was centrist. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of the liberal Nixon. The liberal Nixon increased funding for Medicare. Remember, Medicare was medical care for old people. Well, that's liberal. The conservative Republican Nixon increased spending, government spending, for a liberal program. The liberal Nixon increased spending for Medicaid, medical care for poor people. The liberal Nixon increased government spending for Social Security. These are liberal ideas. This was started under FDR. These 2 were started under Lyndon Johnson. And yet Nixon supported them. So he's not this ultra right-wing, nutcase conservative, all government is bad automatically sort of president. Let's keep going. he supported affirmative action with something called the Philadelphia Plan. You don't need to know specifically what that was, but basically government endorsed the idea that race should be a factor when considering college admissions, jobs in government. Nixon started the EPA. Anyone know what the EPA is? Environmental Protection Agency. That is the agency that protects wildlife, trees. It's liberal. OSHA. Anyone know what OSHA is? Office of Safety and Health Administration. Office of Safety and Health Administration. How many of you work at a job where you get paid? Okay. If you are injured on the job and you believe that your company was negligent, it happened to me one time in this building. I walked out to my car in the middle of winter, stepped on some ice, slipped, grabbed my car mirror, driver's side car mirror, thinking I'm saved, and it snapped right off. Duct tape. I could have sued the school because I slipped because you did not properly salt the parking lot. I didn't. It's a piece of crap car. But who would I have contacted had I decided to pursue? Yep, OSHA. It's a government agency that makes sure that companies have safe working conditions. Like if you're in the science room and you're doing some crazy experiment and you get stuff in your eyes and you're looking around and the emergency shower thing that's supposed to be there is broken. Well, sue them, right? Sue Mr. Anderson, sue the school district. They were negligent. And who do you contact? OSHA. Okay.
Endangered.
Yeah, I misspelled that. It's endangered. The Endangered Species Act. Endangered. Yeah. Endangered Species Act is the law that protected wildlife that was near extinction. I mean, do you know for a while the American eagle was almost extinct? This law brought it back.
What did the EPA do?
EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, protected the environment, right? Oil spills, pollution, air. The EPA is what does that. Where people start losing support for who doesn't support the idea that eagles should be protected? We're all behind that. It's the national symbol. But where some people have lost a little bit of support for the idea that wildlife needs to be protected, I'll give you an example. It's the new Stillwater Bridge. Do you know one reason why that thing took so long was because the government said, wait a minute, there's a protected species in that river. And if you build that bridge, that protected species will be negatively affected. Zebra mussels.
What? Why?
I know that.
Why are they protected?
Uh-huh. Right? And other fish. And so people are like, you're going to protect fish and we can't build a new bridge? And then the federal government said, well, the river is beautiful. And if you build a bridge, it'll be ugly. That's another thing that the federal government has the power to do is make sure that wildlife is protected visually. I'm not trying to be sarcastic. You might agree that bridge ruins the natural beauty of the river. But what other people said was, yeah, if you look that way, the river's pretty. But if you look that way, that's a big smokestack right there. It's kind of ugly. There's no way that this bridge is making this worse. And so they eventually got the federal government to say, yeah, I guess that smokestack is kind of ugly. Build the bridge. Yeah, they did build a nice looking bridge.
Is this like from Oregon?
Was Nixon supported? Well, Nixon's team blew. This is the 1972 election.
Is this from Oregon?
This is one of the most lopsided elections in American history. Right? Liberals voted for him. Conservatives voted for him. He was widely supported. I mean, everyone voted for him. I mean, the popular vote wasn't close. The electoral vote wasn't close. It is amazing. So we will start talking about this tomorrow. How did a guy that do this well become the only president to resign. And had he not resigned, he would have been kicked out. What happened? How did this happen? So stay tuned. We'll attack that time. Hey, I'm done talking. We will have this little simulation tomorrow in class. So you've got the rest of the hour to do what you want.
Okay, I'm a couple minutes down now.
I think I would have had like the exact amount of paper I needed.